Hello, gorgeous seekers, and welcome back to our moon magic. And we have yet another dramatic, powerful, flashy, authenticity-driven moon to work with for this Scorpio full moon. I find the Scorpio full moon to be a powerful one every year. It brings us back to the basics of what the Taurus-Scorpio axis talks about, which is all about birth, death, the creative cycle, and our authenticity within that. And this is very honest energy. I would say that this full moon has an honesty to it, a soulful honesty that can bring us back into alignment, help us to kind of find that center point again, and help us to get calibrated to our own soul calling really, really efficiently and effectively. But here's the thing with it. There's a ton of fixed sign energy getting activated for this full moon. Fixed signs include Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. And 3 of the 4 fixed signs are getting activated during this full moon and in big, powerful ways. And whenever we're working with fixed sign energy like this, it means that we are talking about what we want to sustain for a long time. This is about kind of the anchor points within ourselves and if we're really anchoring into things that nourish us. So let's talk about this. This is a moon, this full moon is going to be happening on April 27th. And we're going to have the moon at 7 degrees of Scorpio and the sun at 7 degrees of Taurus, and very close by the sun, they're getting very close to a conjunction, we have Uranus. So sun and Uranus is at 10 degrees of Taurus, and sun are very close together, starting a really powerful conversation that activates the Uranus's desire for change and shift, desire for making and innovating and progressing forward in life. They are opposing this moon, which immediately is going to be asking you what your status quo is. And is it working for you? And to really get brutally honest with yourself about things that you take for granted as a part of your schedule, as a part of your identity, as a part of like who you think you have to be. Is that really something that you have to be? I'm reading a new book by Martha Beck. I have mentioned her quite frequently, but she just came out really truly this week that I'm filming this with a new book called The Way of Integrity. And in it, she was taking apart the concept of hustle culture and how when you look up the definition of hustle in the dictionary, it has to do with getting other people to do what you want them to do, forcing people to move faster, forcing yourself to move faster, tricking people. It's really interesting that there's such an emphasis on, manipulating ourselves in order to manipulate, to get confirmation, to feel safe, to feel like we fit into culture. And so this is a moon that's going to be asking those heavy, deep questions. Scorpio energy is always going to be diving beneath the surface. It doesn't really, whenever you're working with Scorpio energy, forget the surface, we're going to go all the way in. We're going to ask some deep questions. And Uranus as well is not about fitting in. It's not about doing things just so that you can get the approval from your tribe, right? Or from your social group. And so this moon is just going to, right off the bat, in your face, it's going to be bringing up those questions. Also, there's just a ton of energy in Taurus during this full moon. We have not only our sun and Uranus hanging out very close together, but some degrees away, we also have Venus, Mercury, and Lilith. They are not directly opposing this moon. However, you can see how this moon is illuminating and helping us lean into what's working to get revealed during this Taurus season, which has to do with what's bringing us joy, true, deep, nourishing joy. What is bringing us satisfaction, a sense of ease, a sense of peace. And as I say often, it's normally not those external things we think we have to be grabbing for. It's normally the simple things, a creative project, a restful conversation with somebody we love, right? And so this moon is just asking big, honest questions. And that's not the only conversation that's going on, the opposition here. We also have Saturn in the mix, because what would a full moon be without Saturn sneaking in to have an opinion, right? Saturn is at 12 degrees of Aquarius and is going to be squaring this full moon. So there's our third fixed sign, right? So we have a ton of energy in Taurus, we have a full moon in Scorpio, and we have Saturn in Aquarius. And so Saturn's squaring off against both the moon and the sun, actually, and Uranus. So Saturn's just wanting to come in here and challenge all of it. Squares often are where we come to growth, right? Where we have to push through something uncomfortable, where we, instead of turning away from what it is that we want to break through, we go into it and we ask the questions. And that is kind of the hallmark of this moon. If there's been something that you have known you've been longing to shift in your life, whether it is a work routine, a relationship to yourself, a relationship to a routine you have, and you know that you want to shift it, but you can also kind of put up with it and tolerate it. And maybe next month, maybe next year, I will give myself the honor of actually listening to what it is that I want to shift. This full moon's going to kind of be pushing that button, that maybe little sensitive part of yourself that you haven't wanted to ask those questions. You haven't wanted to go to that part of the process, because it means that once you ask that question, you're going to have to ask like 20 more questions. And once you open that door, you are going to have to keep following that path, right? It's a little intimidating to fully open to what our soul is asking us to do differently, because it does mean that we can't just stay with the status quo. And that was actually the message that came up for me was, what are you afraid of knowing within yourself? What are you afraid to ask yourself? What it feels scary to ask yourself during this full moon? And this isn't about other people, right? Other people may be involved in the questions that you're asking, but these are really the questions you ask within yourself. And are you allowing yourself to hear them? Or have you been kind of putting it in a box, tucking it into a back corner of your mind, trying your best to ignore how you've transformed? Because as we know, with the Scorpio energy, with the Scorpio full moon, this is about transformation. This is about an evolution. This is about a shift and who we are becoming. And all of this energy, the way it's talking, the way it's communicating, is it's like we want to find empowerment and transformation. We want to find joy in transformation rather than fearing it, rather than feeling that it is just about loss. We want to find how transformation is also about creativity. It's also about play. It's also about exploration. And that's the Uranus energy in this moon as well. As Uranus is wanting us to innovate our evolution, our changes. He wants to have us play and explore and ask, how could we improve this situation so that we feel better, so that we feel a little bit more in alignment with it? A classic example is if you're somebody who doesn't really like to cook big elaborate meals at the end of the day, because your energy is, you want to use that sacred, beautiful energy to write, or to talk with friends, or to get a project done, or just do any other thing, right? But you still feel like you have to come to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the day and then spend a lot of time cooking. How could you innovate that? How could you make it so that you don't have to cook as often, or that you can keep your energy for the things you really want to do? Even these basic things, it doesn't always have to be the catastrophic big changes. Often where we are blocking ourselves, stopping ourselves from living a life that feels truly nourishing and supportive of us, we're blocking ourselves in small things. We're blocking ourselves in the places we're not necessarily always looking. And there's a voice within many of us, and maybe not everyone, but many of us, and I know I have this voice, that says we're not worthy of innovating and updating and changing our routines to better honor ourselves, because we just have to do it the way that it's always been done. We just have to continue to live our lives in this by rote fashion and just repeat it over and over and over again. So this moon may feel really emotional. You may find that you're asking scary questions in yourself and that you're a little overwhelmed, I think this full moon in many ways to me is like the classic full moon, right? Where it brings up a lot of emotion. We're working with water energy here. The moon is in fall here in Scorpio, which just means that it's not at it doesn't have as easy a time expressing itself. So you may also find that you're having a hard time finding the words, but you may also find this moon is just simply you innovating and opening your heart to innovating what it is that wants to be innovated. Now there's one last aspect I haven't even brought up because you can see there's a lot going on here, but Mars recently moved into Cancer by the time of this full moon. And Mars is at 2 degrees of Cancer. And it's such an interesting placement. Mars in Cancer is looking more for security. And when I think about that, when I think about Mars in Cancer, what I mean by security is, are we trusting ourselves? Are we actually taking actions that reflect our soul? Or are we taking actions that reflect where we feel we have to manipulate ourselves, where we feel we have to just play roles to keep social approval, to keep the status quo? And that Mars in Cancer transit is trining this full moon in Scorpio, and it's bringing up that deeper question and supporting the moon in many ways. That trine is one of the more supportive aspects of this moon. So there's a lot going on here, and it's a rich, dense moon, and don't want you to get overwhelmed by that or intimidated by that, but it is a time to get very honest with places where you may have been blinding yourself, just so that you wouldn't have to, because it's a little intimidating, I think is what it is. It's like, it's intimidating to ask these questions. And I would always say, I'm a big fan of micro practices. That's, for me, I've found to be the way. It's the easiest way to keep the conversation going and not to feel overwhelmed by it, is to do micro practices. You may just want to start with simpler questions with this moon. You don't have to jump straight to what is my life purpose and what am I doing and I need to quit everything and burn my life down. Start with a simple question like, am I enjoying, my cooking schedule? I don't know, whatever. I just keep using that example. Does it feel good to do that weekly Zoom chat? Is it working for me? How can I change it? And then the follow-up question would be, how can I make adjustments to that so that it feels good to me? Or do I have to do it if it's something that is really not feeling true for me? Oh my gosh, this card, 7 of Swords. I feel like it's just been, 7 of Swords has been kind of lurking around. I don't know. See, this is where the surprise of these readings always comes in. 7 of Swords. This card to me, speaking of hustle, when I was talking about Martha Beck's kind of taking a part of that word and the use of that word, and I know many of us are kind of over that whole era of hustle memes and all of that, but 7 of Swords to me is like the ultimate representation of when we're very busy in our thoughts and our actions, trying to keep everything in the order that we need it to. So, this is an image of a man who's disarming his enemy by sneaking in and, grabbing some weapons and then sneaking out. And this is also about a being who is feeling like they have to do things behind the scenes, that they aren't allowed to just take their space, that they aren't allowed to address the problem head on, but that they have to kind of find workarounds and excuses for why they're allowed to exist and why they're allowed to do the creative work. And so I often find with this has to do with imposter syndrome. This has to do with lack of self-love. It has to do with feeling like we're not allowed to just out front, in the face of it, embrace how we're changing. And like I said, I think 7 of Swords too speaks to, it starts with the small things, the small places where we mute ourselves, right? And I think sometimes we think about this, we think about our relationship to other people and how we're doing this for other people, but a lot of times this is our relationship in ourselves. The relationship within ourselves that says, there's this little voice that says, yeah, you know, I think that might just be too selfish for you to just want to be creative today. I think probably you need to just do things the same old way. And that's the conversation that's going on here. And Seven of Swords to me is a really useful visual and concept, because when you're kind of maybe asking some questions, you know, and I would even recommend during this moon, you can just kind of go through your day and notice the feeling state of each thing physically, mentally. And anytime you have a feeling like Seven of Swords, where you feel like you're getting away with something, where you feel like you're sneaking around, or you feel like you're doing something that is kind of self-betraying and doesn't feel very good, but you're doing it anyway, just notice what's coming up for you. Notice whether it's that it's something that needs to change because it doesn't feel good to you and you're just doing it because you feel you have to, or because you feel like you're getting away with something when you're doing something that's joyful and you haven't quite let yourself fully embrace how you are morphing. Either way, Seven of Swords is a really wonderful representation of a very specific, I think, feeling state that's a bit jammed up and tense and scared. And it's really helpful when we notice it throughout the day, not just in the big moments in life, but in the little moments, in the little quiet moments. Notice where you're self-betraying and notice where you're shutting yourself down, because that's where we're going to want to look during this full moon. That's where we're going to want to ask, how can we innovate this? How can we shift this? How can we empower ourselves to make changes? Because who said that things have to stay the same way? Who said that you have to answer emails at this time of day, in this fashion, in this order, this many times a week? Who has given the directive for that? And I really hope that nobody is having a boss out there who's saying that this is the email schedule at all times. But regardless, this is a really great moon to innovate those things, rather than turning away and just saying, oh, it's a normal feeling that I have every week, every day, comes up all the time. Oh, well, I've just learned to live with it. Look at those places of pain. Look at those places of discomfort. And, you know, this is not about, you know, being valorous in our pain and withstanding, training ourselves into painful postures of self-desertion. This moon really wants us to come back home to ourselves. And I know I talk about this all the time, but this is my thing. So here's another moon that's just bringing up my thing again, which is just my life practice and my life passion. So I think with that card, that card just right in the face, I'm going to close it out here. We are going to be doing an amazing activation over on my Patreon for this moon. We always do an exercise, a discussion close to the full moon so that we can really activate it, really work with it, and feel through it together in that great little community. It's a wonderful place to be. I would love to see you there. And of course, we're going to be doing all sorts of May readings coming up. So I'd love for you to like and subscribe and hang out with me. It really helps me out and it means so much to me. And of course, you can find me on Instagram and on my website. So all of those places are great places to connect with me. I really hope you guys have a beautiful day and have a beautiful full moon. And I will talk to you so soon, my dear friends.